Star Trek: The Next Generation, Starfleet Academy, Loyalties, Chapter 5. Beverly immediately noticed Commander Max Wiley was not happy. The reason was Dr. Cameron's class went over time, and most of his cadets were late. Beverly also knew he did not want to hear any excuses. Beverly nervously shifted in her seat. Wiley's medical emergencies course was not easy. In each class, cadets coped with a crisis with a medical emergency thrown in, all simulated in the holodeck. And every week, the emergencies were harder to solve and occurred faster. No one knew what to expect. In one simulation, you piloted a shuttle and solved a medical emergency. In the next simulation, you fixed a leaking conduit in engineering and at the same time helped a fallen comrade. It was scary. Beverly knew that every decision she made could affect the crewmates around her. And after every class, she would ask herself the same question. Am I really Starfleet material? But the worst part of the class was Wiley's tough attitude. Beverly remembered the first day in Wiley's class. She knew his speech to first-year cadets was always the same. Look to the right of you, he would say. Now look to the left of you. These people will probably not be here next year. Gone. Not good enough for Starfleet. Will it be you? Today's short lecture was just as stern. May I remind you that promptness is a necessity in Starfleet, he stated, standing ramrod straight in front of the cadets, his hands clasped behind his back. And I will add a second message. All classes must be attended. All classes are essential for the well-rounded Starfleet officer. Even though Wiley didn't look in their direction, Beverly and Claire exchanged glances. Beverly knew the brief lecture was especially pointed at them. Wiley moved behind the main computer console. Commander Vadok, an instructor from Starfleet Medical, was already in place behind the computer. The Vulcan commander was in charge of choosing the holodeck simulations for the Starfleet medical students and often helped Wiley announce each exercise. The first simulation team will consist of cadets Tricorders and Howard, announced Vadok, reading from a computer screen. You will be negotiating the Benthos asteroid belt. Your shuttlecraft has just entered the belt. There is an Andorian ensign in your crew. You are to head to the planet Pella, beyond the belt. As usual, when you are ready to proceed with the simulation, you must both step on the template. The program will then begin. Beverly and Tricorders stepped up to the circular pad on the floor to begin the first simulation. The door suddenly hissed open, and Stephen Cody and Imto Particle rushed in. Cadet Particle, Wiley said scornfully. Glad you could join us. You missed my lecture on promptness, so I'll repeat it to you after class. Please sit with the rest of the cadets. Wiley turned to Stephen. So my assistant finally made it too. Cadet Cody, I expect you to come to an assigned class on time. You have work to do. Please take your place with me at the simulation computer. Stephen hurried behind the console and stood next to Wiley. He gave a wan smile to the officers. Ready to proceed on your commands, sirs. Please step on the circular template in the center of the room, continued Vadok to the two waiting cadets. You both must handle all general and medical emergencies that may arise. Begin when ready. Beverly and Tricorders looked at each other and nodded. As they stepped on the template, the cadet and computer-filled room seemed to dissolve. They were suddenly on board a Federation starship shuttlecraft, but it was the view screen that caught Beverly's eye. A dense collection of rocky asteroids loomed in front of the tiny craft. A yellow alert klaxon sounded as a computer voice rang out. Warning! Shuttlecraft has entered the outer limits of the Benthos asteroid belt. Tricorders quickly sat in the left pilot seat. Her fingers flew over the computer panels controlling the shuttle's microfusion thruster units. I will handle the shuttle, she called to Beverly. Cutting back on the thrusters should slow us down and allow me to negotiate the belt. Warning, communications have been compromised. Beverly sat in the pilot's seat next to Kavar. She punched several square panels on the communications console and frowned as she read the computer readout. Communications with Starfleet and Pella were definitely down. According to the information on the screen, the mostly metal asteroids interfered with communications. She pushed several panels to compensate for the asteroids and smiled as a red warning light above the console turned yellow. Communication paths restored. There was a loud groan behind the two cadets. Tikavar raised an eyebrow at Beverly. I've got it, Beverly responded, grabbing a nearby holographic medical tricorder. She hurried to the back of the shuttle. Behind the last seat was a young, blue-skinned Andorian ensign. The left antenna on his head was broken and bleeding, and his arm was bent back in an unnatural position. I was thrown against a bulkhead when the first asteroid hit, the ensign whispered. First asteroid? We were hit before... The craft suddenly pitched to the left. The ensign grabbed the seat with his good arm. Beverly was thrown to the ground, the medical tricorder flying from her hand. She covered her head as a side panel above her spit out sparks. She quickly looked to the front of the shuttle. Tikavar was still in her seat, holding onto the console, a deep frown forming on her face as she concentrated on the pilot controls. Beverly turned back to the ensign as he moaned loudly. She crawled over to him, stopping only to grab the dropped medical tricorder. Kneeling by the Andorian, she quickly ran the instrument over the ensign's body. You've dislocated your shoulder and you have a concussion. Just ouch, she yelled, grabbing her right hand and dropping the tricorder again. It just shocked me. The shuttle suddenly rocked violently from side to side. As best as she could, Beverly held on to the nearby seat as a red alert klaxon began. Warning, direct hit to port thruster. Damage to propulsion systems. Evasive action recommended. Beverly, Tikavar shouted above the sound of twisting metal. I'm trying to cut off all propulsion commands to the thrusters. Are you hurt? No, I don't think so, she yelled above the noise, looking at her throbbing hand. Take care of the ensign. I'll try to contact Pella or Starfleet. Right, Beverly called back, then turned to the ensign. The Andorian's face contorted in pain as he tried to move. Just stay still, she coached in a shaky voice. Let me see what... Warning. Explosion imminent. Impulse engine overload. Explosion in 3 seconds. 2 seconds. 1 second. The lights dimmed. Beverly watched as the shuttlecraft and the Andorian ensign dissolved in front of her. She saw Claire, a sympathetic smile on her face. Beverly tried to smile back, but could not. Her hand tingled, and as she stood up, she felt as if she'd been holding her breath during the entire simulation. Simulation terminated, Vatic announced. Wiley stepped out from behind the console. You and your shuttlecraft just blew up, cadets, he remarked, pointing out the obvious. Cadet Tikavar, you must remember to rely on the autopilot more often. The onboard computers can usually maneuver faster than a Vulcan and most other sentient beings, especially with such small objects all around you, he commented. He turned to Beverly. Cadet Howard, my advice to you is to stabilize your patient much faster and to practice holding on to a tricorder. Laughter rippled through the holodeck. Yes, sir, she answered. She felt her face flush. But, sir, at one point in the simulation, I thought I felt the tricorder shock me. I'll check that out, cadet. Please sit down, both of you, Wiley instructed. As he moved behind the console and pushed several panels, he addressed the class. I would like to remind everyone, it is not whether you succeed in stopping an imminent explosion or healing a patient. We are testing your reactions under various conditions, and you are learning what it's like to be in an emergency situation. Wiley hesitated, looking down at his readouts, then turned to Beverly. I'm sorry, Cadet Howard. I see no evidence of a shock coming from your tricorder. Perhaps you twisted your hand when you fell against the seat. Beverly nodded and looked at her hand. It still tingled. Perhaps. Wiley turned to Vadok and nodded. The next simulation team will be Cadets Voy and Peterson. Claire smiled again at Beverly as she and Cadet Peter Peterson stepped up to the circular template. Beverly didn't know a great deal about the second-year medical cadet. She did know that he missed the medical emergencies class his first year because of a family emergency and was taking the course this year to catch up. Takavar once told her that Peter was a grandson of Admiral Cartwright. Over 50 years ago, the Admiral and several others planned to stop peace talks between the Klingons and the Federation by assassinating the Klingon Chancellor. But the scheme didn't work. Beverly remembered that Captain James T. Kirk and some of his crew from the USS Enterprise discovered the plan and stopped the assassination attempt. The historic Khitomer Conference continued as planned, and peace between the Klingons and the Federation occurred several years later. Peter seemed determined to restore his family's name and Starfleet's future. You will be on a Federation starship, Vadok was announcing, reading from the computer screen in front of him. Cadet Peterson, you were the first officer on board the USS Gallant, a fictitious Starfleet vessel. The starship has just been fired upon by a Romulan bird of prey with both phasers and photon torpedoes. Cadet Voy, you will be a lieutenant commander on the ship's medical team. You have just been called to the bridge. You both must handle all general and medical emergencies that arise. Begin when ready. As they stepped on the template, Beverly and the other students watched as the room before them dissolved into the expansive bridge of a Federation starship. As a red alert klaxon sounded in the background, several bridge officers were pulling themselves up from the floor, trying to reach their stations. The tactical officer announced a phaser strike to decks 3 and 4, but shields were holding. The officer at the operations center grunted and replied that the Romulan bird of prey had cloaked again. The captain acknowledged the officer's remarks, then moved quickly to navigation to help put out a small electrical fire. Peter was helping the helmsman crawl back to his seat when Claire nudged him and pointed to the view screen. They both gasped as the stars seemed to ripple and a Romulan ship uncloaked. As it flew past the Gallant, another phaser blast struck the Federation ship. Peter was thrown to the right, while Claire fell to the floor next to the captain. "Doctor!" shouted the captain above the red alert klaxon. He helped Claire to her feet. "Attend to the first officer. He's over there," he said, pointing to Peter. "Helm, take us out of here. Away from the bird of prey. Mark 172, warp 7. Claire rushed over to Peter. His eyes were closed, and he was holding his stomach. "Peter, you all right?" she asked. She grabbed a nearby holographic medical tricorder and bent down, running the instrument over him. Peter opened his eyes wide and started shaking uncontrollably. "Hey, Peter," Claire whispered to him. "You're doing a good job. It looks like you're really hurt." She hesitated and smacked the side of the tricorder. "Strange. I can't seem to get a reading on this thing." Beverly was puzzled. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair as she watched her roommate from the side. Peter kept shaking as Claire tried to scan. He was very convincing as a patient. In fact, too convincing, Beverly thought. She couldn't stand She couldn't stand it anymore. Even though it was against class rules, she ran over and stood beside Claire. "What's wrong with Peter?" she shouted above the noise. "Bev, what are you... It's all right, Bev. Go on back," Claire protested, frowning and waving Beverly back to the side. Peter's just playing his part of the simulation, remember? I don't think so, Claire, she replied. She quickly bent down and pushed the medical tricorder away from Peter. It slipped from Claire's hand and clattered to the floor. Beverly grimaced as the captain continued to yell commands in the background. Reaching into her jumpsuit pocket, she winced as she pulled out her small personal medical scanner with her sore hand. Peter did not move. She ran the scanner over his head and chest and announced above the noise, "He's had some type of seizure or a shock." She reached out and took Peter's hand. It was cold and clammy. "Computer stop program." It startled Beverly as the noise quickly ceased and the starship dissolved around her. Claire knelt on the floor beside her and stared at Peter. Beverly looked up and saw the stunned faces of her classmates. She suddenly noticed Wiley and Vatic at her side, so she moved out of the way. Vatic examined Peter with his medical tricorder and tapped the comm badge on his shirt. "Medical emergency. Direct transport to Sickbay 5. 2 to beam over. Energize." Everyone quietly watched as Peter and Vatic transported out of the holodeck. Peter's face was pale. He was barely conscious. "At least he's still breathing," Beverly thought. As the whine of the transporter ended, Wiley turned to Claire and ran his hand through his short hair. "What did you do?" he demanded, emphasizing each word. Claire was dumbfounded. "Nothing, sir. What do you mean, nothing?" he interrupted. "You must have done something. There are fail-safes on holodecks. No one should get hurt." He paused and seemed to collect himself. "I repeat, what did you do?" "Nothing. I was just doing the simulation, really," Claire protested, standing up to face Wiley. "The tricorder didn't seem to work, so I..." Beverly stood close to Wiley. "Sir, I was watching. Maybe it was the same shock that got me. I know Cadet Voy didn't..." "I didn't ask for your opinion, Cadet Howard," he responded, glaring at Beverly. She quickly stepped back as he turned to Claire again. "Do you remember pushing a wrong button? Did you trip over anything?" "No, sir," Claire protested, her voice cracking. "I wasn't even close to any consoles. I just went along with the simulation. What happened to Peter wasn't my fault. I mean, it couldn't be my fault." "We'll see about that," said Wiley. He turned on his heel and marched toward the exit of the holodeck classroom. As he approached the door, the whine of the transporter filled the now silent room. Commander Vatic materialized and walked up to Wiley. "Commander Wiley, you best come with me. As professor, it is your responsibility for the simulations." "Yes, I know." Yes, I know. "So let me do my job and determine what happened," said Wiley, moving past Vatic. "On the contrary, Commander," Vatic said in a matter-of-fact voice as he firmly grasped Wiley's arm. "You are to report to your commanding officer. 1 cadet, perhaps 2, he said, nodding to Beverly, has been hurt under your authority. 1 such incident may be considered an accident. I do not mean to imply anything, but 2 such accidents may be deliberate." Wiley glared in Claire's direction. "We'll see about that, too," he growled and walked out the exit, the Vulcan commander following close behind. Chapter 6. Claire looked around her dorm room and sighed. She tilted her head, puzzled. Why didn't I see it? "There's no reason for you to blame yourself, Claire," said Imto Particle, his bushy white eyebrows meeting above his nose as he frowned. "We all thought Peter's reaction was part of the simulation." "And we still don't know what happened to Peter," added Dooley Breach, resting his hand on his chin. "Or even what happened to you, Bev. How's your hand?" Fine now, she responded, flexing her right hand. Almost as if nothing happened. But I know I felt something. Claire ignored the discussion and continued. I should have known. I should have realized something was wrong when that dumb medical tricorder wouldn't work. Bev knew. Claire punched the pillow lying next to her in frustration. Claire, I was looking at the simulation from a different viewpoint, Beverly responded. She knew there was nothing she could say that would cheer Claire. Not only that, being in a simulation is a stimulating experience, Tricorders pointed out as she leaned against Beverly's desk. Things become distorted. You're not always at your best, which is why Starfleet insists on such a class, to get us used to reacting quickly in an emergency. Is that supposed to make me feel better, Tricorders? Asked Claire, narrowing her eyes at the Vulcan. It is the truth. Beverly sighed and stared at the floor. They were all getting tired and testy. For the past hour, they had discussed the simulations, trying to figure out what happened. They even acted out the simulation involving Peter. Imto played the captain, Tricorders pretended to be Claire, and Dooley acted out the part of Peter. Beverly and Claire tried to remember each move from their points of view, but to no avail. They still could not determine what happened. The chime sounded at Beverly's door. The door hissed open and Gren Edit stepped into the room. Beverly felt as if she were waiting for the verdict from a jury. I talked to my friend who works in the infirmary, Gren said, standing in front of Claire and Beverly, as the others gathered around him. Peter is all right, but he's had a shock to his system. Doctors say he will not be back for school for days. Gren further explained that Peter had been feeling ill that day, but it was only secondary to the neuroshock he received. According to the doctors, it was almost as if a strong phaser blast had hit Peter. The shock not only stunned him like a real phaser, but momentarily disrupted almost every nerve in his body. Peter's hands and feet were still numb. Does Peter remember anything? Asked Imto, standing next to Gren. No, just that he felt sick to his stomach just before class. He said he doesn't remember a thing after the simulation threw him across the bridge. He hesitated, lacing his long fingers in front of him. I also heard the preliminary investigation. It showed that the holodeck did not malfunction. Does that mean it wasn't an accident? Imto asked, scratching his head and turning to Beverly. Could the holo-generated Andorian ensign have shocked you? I don't think so, Imto, she replied. And he wasn't present when Peter was shocked. And I don't think any of us believe Claire caused Peter to be shocked, added Dooley. As far as I can see, the guilty party would have to be the person who developed the simulation. And the finger points to Wiley. I can't figure out why he would want to hurt you or Peter. Maybe it was simply negligence on his part, suggested Gren. Or maybe he meant to hurt any one of us, replied Imto, his black eyes wide with the thought. There is another possibility when it comes to Peter, said Tricorders, folding her long arms in front of her. Peter's grandfather was involved in the conspiracy to stop the early Klingon and Federation alliance at Khitomer. I know that Wiley was on Khitomer as a third-year cadet. He was assigned to the USS Magellan on a training mission sent to the planet. and he has always firmly supported the Klingon-Federation alliance." "How do you know that?" asked Dooley, staring at the cadet. "I read a great deal." "To Kavar, do you think Wiley would hurt Peter because of his grandfather's involvement in trying to stop the peace?" Beverly asked, her brow coming together with concern. "I am not accusing anyone of anything," Kavar replied, her expression as bland as usual. "I am pointing out another possibility. Like everyone else's suggestions, it is merely speculation on my part." "But why hurt Beverly?" asked Dooley. "She was not really hurt," Kavar said, "and perhaps her shock was delivered by mistake." "Wiley was quick to dismiss Beverly's claim," added Imto. Everyone in the room fell silent. Claire suddenly grabbed a jacket and walked out the door. Dooley looked at Beverly. "Want me to go after her?" Beverly shook her head. She knew that Claire would head for the second floor of Regent Hall. She knew, too, that she wanted to do the same thing, confront Commander Wiley. She threw on her jacket and started after Claire. "She's running on enough adrenaline to supply all the cadets at Starfleet Medical, and so am I," Beverly thought, as she saw her roommate in the distance. She, too, wanted to know why Wiley, or anyone else for that matter, would want to hurt a cadet. And she wanted to know what he was hiding, why he didn't listen to her when she said she had been shocked. She caught up with Claire as she reached the door of Regent Hall. Neither said a word as they entered the building. No one passed them as they walked up the stairs to Wiley's office. Beverly was glad that the corridors were empty. At this time of the day, some students were studying in study halls and reading centers. Others were making their daily trek to the cafeteria for dinner, and still others were in their dorm rooms, using the extra time before dinner to prepare for the next day's classes. Claire pressed the chime on Wiley's office door, but there was no answer. "Computer," she said, speaking to the computer control display on the wall. "Where is Commander Max Wiley?" "Commander Max Wiley is currently on the first floor of Regent Hall." The cadets looked wide-eyed at each other at the sound of footsteps, as the sound of footsteps rang through the stairwell. Commander Wiley appeared from around the corner and stopped. An unwelcoming smile crossed his lips. "Wonderful, just wonderful. First I have to deal with Moody, now you two." "We just came to talk to you," said Claire, her shaking voice barely a whisper. Wiley chuckled softly to himself and stepped past the cadets to open his door. "Well, you might as well come in," he said, as the door swished open. Beverly had never seen the commander look so despondent. Suddenly she was worried. In the 3 weeks she had been attending Wiley's class, he had always stood tall. He always talked with a confidence that only comes with command. The man before her was stooped and tired. It was almost as if he didn't care about anything, almost as if he had given up. They followed the commander into his office. Beverly looked around the room and noticed 2 shelves of old books and stacks of computer tapes. In front of the stacks was a large glass and metal desk. The office was just like Wiley, tidy, professional, and in perfect order. "Commander Wiley, there's no way I could have done something wrong during the simulation," Claire started to say. Yes, he said, throwing himself into an overstuffed chair in the corner. He threw a data pad toward his desk, but it missed and clattered to the floor. Beverly started to reach for the object. No, don't bother, let it lie, he grunted. He turned to Claire. Now I suppose you're going to plead with me that you did nothing wrong, that you're an outstanding student. Claire blinked and stood up straight. I was one of the top performers in the simulation part of the test to enter Starfleet. I know, cadet boy, responded Wiley, standing up and ordering a coffee from a nearby replicator. He picked up the steaming mug and sat down again. I was there, remember? He continued. But that still doesn't mean you didn't do something wrong today. But what? Claire protested. I have no idea yet, he commented, pointing a finger at Claire. But it seems this outstanding student managed to skip a class yesterday, and with such disregard for the rules, why shouldn't I suspect you? Claire put a hand to her head and turned away from Wiley. Beverly stepped forward. Commander Wiley, I also have a question. Why did you just dismiss the idea that I had been shocked during my simulation? Because there was no evidence, Cadet Howard, he said, frowning. You were also being thrown around the cabin of the shuttlecraft. As a future doctor, you must know that a fall can result in excessive pressure on a nerve. You probably fell just right, and it only felt similar to a shock. Beverly's mouth formed a thin line in frustration. Has anyone checked the computer simulation tape? She suggested. Maybe it only seems all right. Maybe something went wrong with the tape during the simulation that caused Peter, and maybe me, to be shocked. Don't be ridiculous, he scoffed. Cadet, you were not shocked. And as for the Peterson simulation, I developed it myself, and it worked perfectly before and after, he said, pointing to Claire again. Her little incident. Claire leaned across the desk and looked Wiley in the eye. I did nothing wrong. You must have done something wrong. Why would, said Wiley, stopping in mid-sentence. He suddenly smiled and took another sip of coffee. You both, he started to say. He looked at Claire and Beverly in turn. You both think I'm guilty too, he said in a low voice, just like everyone in Starfleet thinks I am. You think that I somehow did something to the simulation. Commander, none of us knows what really happened, Beverly protested. Wiley acted as if he did not hear Beverly. She had seen that look before, a look filled with anger and bitterness. I should have known, he whispered. You two are trying to get me to confess to doing something to my own simulation and hurting my cadets. He stood up and slammed his hand down on the desk. Well, it won't work. Now get out of here!